Hi, my name is Rachel Mann. I'll be doing an analysis of embezzlement within nonprofit organizations. So first, I'll give some facts and figures. The official definition of embezzlement is theft or misappropriation of funds placed in one's trust or belonging to one's employer. The major type of embezzlement that I'll be talking about is asset misappropriation, which could include something like making a fake company where you charge the organization, but really the money is just going towards yourself. About 11 million people are employed with the nonprofits, plus an additional 110 million who volunteer. About 6% is lost annually to embezzlement within nonprofit organizations, and the median time for fraud to go undetected is about 18 months. Some common characteristics of embezzlers are they are the ages between 31 and 45. They're college educated with no record, and males make up 65% while females make up 35%. So why are nonprofits targeted? A main reason could be lack of resources, especially for smaller organizations. They might not lack the finances to be able to utilize tools like financial managers and auditors who can usually help to prevent and discover causes of fraud. They also lack business knowledge and may not know how important internal controls are. And many people just assume that because you work for a nonprofit that you can be trustworthy and will give you complete access to finances, which make it a lot easier for you to embezzle or steal from the organization. This graph shows the most common contributing factor in cases of embezzlement in 2010 and 2012. So the two biggest causes involve internal controls, while the third is a lack of management review. These reasons could go back to your lack of resources or your lack of knowledge. So a study was done by the Association of Certified Fraud Investigators, where they took 508 cases where 12% were nonprofit. The median loss for the nonprofit cases was $100,000, while the total loss was $30 million. Asset misappropriation made up 95%, while fraudulent disbursement made up most of that. 25% of these cases involved managers embezzling, while 8.6% were executives. They also involved collusion, which makes it easier to embezzle if more people are involved. Some characteristics of these organizations were that they had less than 100 employees with a constant cash flow, which makes it hard to regulate the money coming in and out, and the businesses were in business for 30 or more years. A recent case involving embezzlement would be the St. Albert Catholic School. A woman had access to the bank accounts, and for 16 months she stole over $45,000 by writing checks to herself for personal reasons. This was not the first instance of embezzlement for the school. Only a few months earlier, another woman stole over $65,000 from the PTO where she was the volunteer treasurer. The first case that I'll be looking at is U.S. versus Kaufman. Kaufman worked for a nonprofit that received federal funds. He formed two fake companies and improved invoices in their name using their position at the company. For over 7 years, he paid himself over $110,000, as well as using a company credit card for personal uses, which totaled over $46,000. The biggest mistake in this case was that Kaufman was given complete authorization to write checks without any review from a manager or coworker, so he was able to write these fake invoices without anybody else seeing them before he wrote the checks for them. The next case is People of Michigan versus Enos. Enos had access to two different accounts. One was a high school club where she deposited checks to herself for 3 months totaling $1,000. The second account was a Little League team where she wrote checks to herself as well as writing another officer's name on the checks, which totaled about $20,000. This case is interesting because she was given a harsher punishment because children were involved in both of these organizations that she stole from. The biggest mistake here is that she was the only one who managed the finances for both of these organizations, although it is harder to do in low-scale operations, such as something like a high school club. A few problems surrounding embezzlement are most obviously loss of money and loss of reputation, not only from your investors, but from something like a supplier or something of that nature. I saw a statistic that said investing goes down by 53% after a significant incident is publicized by the news, and people just become more skeptical of investing in companies or donating to companies. Embezzlement can also involve litigation, which can be very long and drawn out and often very expensive. So how can we change things? Embezzlement is always going to exist. We can't change that, but we can change the amount of embezzlement that goes on, especially in nonprofits. It's recommended that you get an audit at least once a year. You can also increase and maintain your internal controls, which could include a system of authorizations, which would include multiple signatures on a check before it can be deposited, or background checks and bonding on employees. You can also require vacations, which would reduce the risk of embezzlement because they know that other people will have to look at their work. You could also implement a system of checks and balances, which would be something like separation of duties, which means that the person that collects the money wouldn't necessarily be the person who records the money or who deposits the money in the bank. We can also look at the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. So this was formed after the Enron scandal in 2002. It applies to publicly traded companies, but most provisions only apply to for-profit organizations except two, which is the whistleblowing protection, which protects whistleblowing if someone sees an act of embezzlement or something skeptical, and document destruction, which is not really necessary today because most things are online, so it's harder to destroy a document or information. So even though most provisions aren't required for nonprofits, at a minimum, nonprofits should consider disclosing financial statements to investors and donors just to let them know how they're doing and give them an accurate description of your financial status. You can also change auditors every 5 years to assure that you have the best auditing possible. So in conclusion, auditing is a much bigger issue than you could ever expect, and it's much easier to get away with, especially if you don't have the proper protocols in place. Nobody is safe from embezzling, meaning no corporations or organizations are safe, even if you're a church or a nonprofit, and no employees are safe, meaning that you can't trust anyone no matter how well you think you know them. And internal controls are your biggest asset. I can't stress that enough, that they are your biggest asset against preventing and detecting embezzlement.